Shalom, and I thought I would give you one more review for the entire course on Hebrew Morph and just prepare you for the final exam. Now, in this video, we won't just review what you've learned in the Hebrew Morph course, but we're going to give you some added insights into Biblical Hebrew now that you've taken this course. So let's just look at some things in Unit 1, where you learned about the basic Hebrew Morph. Right off in Lesson 1, you learned something really important. You learned that English can have many words for one Hebrew word, which makes life easier for you when you're learning Hebrew. You learned that in the Bible, mothers sometimes name their sons according to events in their lives. And here, this is Eve, and she had lost both of her sons, and so she was very happy to finally get Seth, and was just saying that God had appointed her another seed. A lot of the names you have learned have the same spelling as the masculine singular verb in the past tense. That's really important. Masculine singular verb in the past tense. And here's why. Many times this is also the Hebrew root of the word, which will help you learn a lot more vocabulary in the future. Okay, you do remember this? You learned that David's name spells the word for beloved. And you add this letter to make it my beloved. Okay, you add that at the end of the word. And so you had Dodi. But when this letter comes at the end of the word, it doesn't have the yas sound. It has an e sound. Now, we'll go over this more and learn Hebrew through the Bible. And we had Nathan, and you saw how the last letter grows a tail. Yep, there it is. We have the professor, the rabbi telling us. You also learned that Nathan's name can be used for two verbs. We have he gave and he put. Now, most of the time, it's he gave. Now, it is a big verb. Now, what I mean by a big verb in Hebrew is that it can have many shades of meaning. And sometimes it means he put, but that happens in a special way. Notice that it is translated as put when it's talking about God putting wisdom in someone's heart. And I just think that's very interesting. Why don't you study that in the PDF file? And you learned that there is no J in Hebrew. And Yared taught you that. And in Biblical Hebrew, you don't need pronouns the way you do in English with the verb. So one word can mean he set, one word can mean he gave, and then of course one can mean he descended or he went down. And then we have Unit 2, where you got some strange sounds you had to deal with. You reviewed two letters that don't have sounds in the English language. We have Bach and the Ch sounds, and then we have the Ts sound. And you also learned that Hannah's name changes, it loses the last letter, and then it grows a tail. And then we have the word for favor or acceptance. Now, also in Unit 2, you learned about how Hebrew works, and we mirrored it in how we translate it in English. So the hyphens glue the words together to make one Hebrew word, or sometimes I refer to it as one Hebrew unit. And this concept will really help you learn Hebrew and get a hold of it as you grow and as you take the traditional courses. In later lessons, you got to see the English mirror the Hebrew grammar in scripture verses. Now, when I talk about Hebrew grammar, that sounds a little bit scary, but I think if we just demonstrate it this way, it's not so difficult. And that concept helped you learn how to identify the word use, or Rachel, or sheep, in finding the root part of this word. So you could see right here we have Rachel, but it's embedded. And we actually learned that one letter, and learn Hebrew through the Bible. That next course, you'll also learn about the other letter, and you can see how that Hebrew unit comes together, meaning 3 words. And as we constructed a Hebrew unit, we also deconstructed a Hebrew unit. You learned that from the name of Isaac, we had the word for laughter. Not just he laughs, but when we take away that letter that we have from Yom, then we actually have the word for laughter. And you can see how both of those words are in Genesis 21:6, when Sarah talks about how she named Isaac, because she was laughing. And then we got to Unit 3, and it got a lot more complicated because now we were dealing with sentences and phrases. And you learned that words are found in these names. So just by knowing the name of Daniel, you know basically how to say, my advocate is God, or my judge is God. And then we had Gabriel, man of God, which was a phrase. And then we had Michael, which is who is like God. I have to say it's one of my favorite. And then finally we had with us is God. Now, sometimes you hear it like in the songs, God with us, but really it's with us is God. And of course we learned the short term for God that we use reverently, El, and we saw it in all of these names. But you'll find El at the end of a lot of other names, like Nathaniel, which means God gave, and Yoel, or Joel, for the Lord is God. And then we also have Elisha, which means God is my salvation. And there it is in Hebrew. And then Raphael, God has healed. Now, it's also in a city, Bethel, house of God, and also in Samuel, which means heard of God, Shemuel. And you've learned how to find these Hebrew words and names. And the Legos have helped you understand how Hebrew works in sentences. And we have a course on that you can take after this that explains Hebrew grammar through English. And you learn that there is no is in Hebrew. And sometimes we put letters together, we construct it together to make those Hebrew units, like we have my judge. And so the Hebrew sort of morphs these words together. And there it goes. And here we have Daniel. Just 2 units. Yes, that's right, Dan. We have a Hebrew morph. And notice here how we have it come together, and we have Dani, even though it's not in the Bible just like that. But I just wanted to show you that concept. We've seen it again with David. And there we have Dodi. I know that you're thinking it's a David, and then we have Dodi. How is that letter pronounced as an O or as a V? And that we discuss in the next course, Learn Hebrew Through the Bible. And then finally we have the word for God, Ali. And there you go. And we learned that there is no of in Hebrew. And we just have these 2 units. Now notice that this stands for man of God. And you're going to learn in our next course how this is a special combination here. It's called a construct. And that's how Hebrew shows possession. So that's how you would say God's man. And we learned that this unit really meant a lot. It means man or warrior. He strengthened, he prevailed, and it can even be used for great. So just by knowing that one Hebrew unit, you can pick out all these words now in the Bible. And then we had Michael's name, which we know we had 3 main units there. And then we do the Hebrew morph. And we still have another special Hebrew morph here. And we have a merge of 2 Hebrew words together into one unit. And you got to see how that works with any kind of noun. And you were able to, learn all these new words. Now, I just want to say something special about this letter. Actually, it isn't a word by itself. It has to be attached to a word like Daniel. There are about 7 other letters like this that we call sticky letters in our next course that work in this way. And then you learned how to put sentences together with me on who is Seth, who is God, who is Jared, who is Nathan. But remember, there is no is there. So it's who God, who Seth, who Jared, who Nathan. Sounds a bit, me Tarzan, you Jane. But that's how you think in Hebrew. And so it also goes for who like man, who like David, who like Gabriel, who like Seth. It just helps get your mind oriented to biblical Hebrew when you start trying to read the Bible, which I want you to start doing. Okay? And that's what we're going to have in our next course. Learn Hebrew through the Bible. Now with the manual, we had 4 English units. But in Hebrew, of course, we only have 3. But let's talk about this special one, new. That we realize it doesn't stand alone as a word, but it helps us, just like the letter that we had over here that means like. And this is what we have. A lot of times you will have in Hebrew, words will be stuck together either on one side or the other side to help give meaning. So this is a concept that you need to get used to as you learn biblical Hebrew. And remember, we had it with ale, so we have ka'el. And then, of course, we have it here with imnuel. And we have the im with the nu. And it comes together there. And when it does, notice how Miriam's letter has to change because it's no longer the end letter, and so it's not a box anymore. So you want to make sure you change that. And you also learned that you can add this to Yarad's name and his verb, and you were able to pick that out in Genesis 44:26, which was quite good. And you were able to do the same thing with Nathan's name. And again, we have a change there with the end letter. And it means given us. And of course, we had it with Hannah's word here. It's just so nice to have this one word that means have mercy on us. And we also had to change the end letter there. So the Hebrew morph. You learned the meaning of 12 Hebrew names. And you learned how to recognize these names in Hebrew scriptures, which I think is pretty good. And also, you know the meaning of the Hebrew words that come from these names. And you also learned how to recognize these words in Hebrew scriptures. And because you had access to these words, you began to understand how Hebrew form sentences. So, you have learned how to recognize 12 names in Hebrew. And these are the names that you know now. And I think that's really pretty good. And through these 12 names, you learned over 30 terms or words in Hebrew, which is quite impressive, I think. And just as importantly, you learned how to generate some of your own sentences in Hebrew. And now you're ready to take the final exam.